Hello everyone, welcome to our next episode of Next Agriculture. Today we are joined by Benoit Vitoux, a Berlin-based design leader whose career has spanned from healthcare innovation in China to agtech at Infarm and now climate tech at Dryad Networks, where he heads product design. His work sits in perfect intersection of physical systems, digital tools, and real-world impact, and that's what we're gonna discuss today. Benoit, it's such a great pleasure to have you today. We planned this for a long time, and I'm glad we are having this conversation today.
Thank you.
I have so many questions. We will discuss a lot about design, leadership, and we'll discuss about your experience. But to start with, you lived and work in so many ecosystems. What's the one thing that stayed consistent in your design thinking philosophy across all of them?
Well, actually, the one thing which stayed the same across, well, there's several actually. So maybe about me, I'm Benoit. I'm from France originally. From many years ago, classically trained industrial designer. That's where I started. So I had more of a focus of design, but within hardware side of things. And basically, I had the opportunity to span across like several industries, as you mentioned, health tech, ag tech, and now currently I work in climate tech. The thing which been like always central was to understand that a product or even like a problem for a company, for users, doesn't sit alone, it sits within an ecosystem, as you mentioned. And very often when you are designing or companies are building product, they tend to forget about that, I designed this app, I have one user. Well, actually, do you think about the overall span of stakeholders around and how that product is bringing value to one, being used by one, but maybe the other one, someone else is paying for it, and so what is the interaction around all of those, and at the end, how does that influence how you build your product? So I would say that the link has been for me a kind of a systemic approach, and even deeper for that, and in maybe a more personal aspect, which impacted my professional aspect. I'm deeply into like working for products which have what I consider a positive impact on every day on the planet, on people, on being. That's what drives me. I started actually, I remember pretty precisely when I had that understanding. I was at the very beginning of my career, so I started in China. I worked in for several agencies, and I was designing actually a laptop. It was for a Chinese company, and I was spending days and nights just sketching, that piece of plastic. And at some point, my manager at the time showed me, oh yeah, that reminds me of something. It went into what you do, it reminds me of something. He went to a shelf, found a few sketches and showed it to me, and it was almost exactly what I was designing there. And I was like, okay, I'm not doing the right thing here. I'm not trying to solve the right problem. I'm not trying to, that basically I need to pivot. And that's what then brought me to healthcare in that sense. And then, ag tech and so on, because I believe that, it has to be meaningful in a way. So that's how I ended up.
Interesting. That's very interesting. And my question here would be, when you describe, and we're going to dive deeper on that one, design leadership, is it more linked to digital products, or it can be applied something to healthcare like?
Yeah, it's like design in a way is this it's a holistic type of thinking. So yes, it could be a digital product, but it could be a physical product, or it could be a service which is non-tangible as well. The goal in the end is to you identify a problem, you reframe a problem, and then you try to bring a elegant solution which is good from a technological standpoint, user needs, customer needs standpoint, and economical goal. So one of my former mentors said that to me, which was that no, you're a designer. Your goal is to resolve or to bring valuable solutions to a problem. Either it's a digital one or a physical one, or and so on. Like the mindset and the thinking is the same, and could be applied throughout. And so that's how we could think that, for example, healthcare has nothing to do with agtech, for example. Actually, that's wrong in that way, because the mindset that you would have, the process that you will bring to identify user needs and problems and resolve them could go across. Then, of course, you build expertise on a certain field and you get a better understanding and so on, but that applies. And then those solutions could be, a digital product, could be a hardware, and sometimes it's actually a lot of those. So the thing which brought me from healthcare to agtech was actually I built the knowledge to design workflows for healthcare. And for example, maybe let me step back. For healthcare, so I was working for a design agency, an American design agency, and the type of project that we had were, for example, a company like Johnson & Johnson's, Medtronic, Baxter had a very little knowledge in the end about what was happening on site in China. And they were going through to this agency and to ask, okay, so what are the opportunities within, I don't know, dialysis patients, or could be people having like diabetes user journey, or even liver cancer surgery or hip replacement. And then our job was to go in the field, to go through 20, 30 hospitals, observe the surgery, being in the surgery room. And when you do that on one, you see just one. But when you do that on 20, 30, 40, then you start to see patterns and differences and then you start to identify, why is that person faster than the other? Why are their focus on, pricing of this versus that, etc., etc. Then you start to understand the problem in whole, and you start to understand what are the opportunities in that field and business opportunities in that field. And so from that, then we were developing concepts to solve those opportunities. And actually, a lot of those opportunities lie within an ecosystem of users, patients, hospital. So, for example, if you look at a surgery instrument, basically the hospital buys it, the surgeon will actually use it, the patient gets the outcome used with that instrument. The staff taking care of the cleaning of that instrument will also have their word to say. And all of that basically works together. And so through that, for example, so we developed a lot of so all of that has to go through a workflow, basically, and going from, that instrument going through hands to hands and so on. But there is this, and there is also for example, more operational thing. Like one of the projects that I worked on, I remember, was this IV bag at mixing. So you got, when you do IV drips, how to mix the drugs through that. And this goes through a very specific process there. Or we thought it was very specific until we understood that it was completely different from one hospital to another. And they had similar safety issues and so on. So we redesigned the entire workflow and steps and touch points, and that involved, hardware on designing the workstations, that involved the software kind of flow behind as well, that involved how do you work on traceability for those bags, etc., etc. And that's the part which then, when I moved away from China, actually, and I wanted to move away from healthcare because I was doing that for 6 years and I wanted to open to other fields. That's the thing which came interesting to Infarm at the time.
Let me stop you. Let me stop you right there. You described the process so interesting. So it's basically, correct me if I'm wrong. It's basically an ability to have this amazing zoom out perspective to the processes.
Yeah.
Learn and evaluate each process and improve wherever it's possible. Wow, that seems
Yes.
like now I understand how that can be applied in different sectors at any sector, because basically you had to go through the journey not only of the customer but basically all the materials, basically all the experience, and from A to Z, and see how that could be copied,
Exactly.
redesigned, or improved in many ways. Wow, that's fascinating. Well, I was listening to you and I was like, hey, what if we had someone come to our startup and do that design thinking? So I can see the importance, the deep importance right now. So, and as you've said, you moved to from healthcare where you learned all these processes, and you went to Infarm, right? Did
Yeah.
you do the same there? First of all, what did Infarm do, and what did you do at Infarm?
So Infarm was a startup which had the vision to increase food autonomy in cities across the world through vertical farming. I joined them, so they built like basically vertical farms that could be placed either in growth center or within directly in supermarkets. And those farms were capable. I mean, basically, they were technologically capable enough to produce enough herbs. So we were focusing on herbs and leafy greens for actually to supply that supermarket at the time. So we had like very few extra delivery from there. And so I joined them very early in the process, and they went from they went from seed. I went from seed level all the way to I think we did A, B, C, D series, which was then valuation as unicorn, and well, then there was a more of a downside after that we can touch upon after. But so in the first place, Infarm brought me aboard because they were interested by this systematic thinking, or this workflow, or we could say ecosystem thinking, and how to optimize it. Their problem was that they were just beginning. They had the very first farm in the very first shop there, but they had the whole operation done by the harvester was not. Basically, it was not refined, was not standardized, and it was not scalable in a way. But the thing is, like, these operations were so DIY at the beginning that, you know, they needed this kind of a design mindset in a way to identify what were the optimization points, and then to build that product. And a product meaning then the farm, the person operating the farm, the tools around, the software, the hardware, and so on, and then how to scale that. So it was like literally and operating a farm like these in-store farms. It was like small farms, I mean pretty large actually. It was like 2 meter by 3 meter high, placed in supermarket, were exactly like a patient. Your goal is you open the farm as quickly as possible like a patient. You do whatever you have to do in there, in that case harvesting or, well, operating, having a surgery on that patient, and then you close it as quickly as possible without any transfer of germs and so on. Obviously, it's much less complicated to operate a vertical farm, of course, but that was the idea. And so the goal was, okay, how can you have someone going in a supermarket, in and out, below an hour time, harvesting enough produce, cleaning the point of sale, updating, you know, anything from the software, reporting and tracking everything, basically, and then to repeat that again and again in the least amount of time that we could. And so that was the start for it. And then we built new generations of farms which were better suited for that, which were more like scalable from a product standpoint, like in terms of manufacturing and so on. And so yeah, we moved from that one farm to then for the small, like for the in-store farms, about like 1,500 farms across I think like 50 cities, like 10 plus countries. All of that within a short amount of years. So
Wow.
yeah, for that I then had the chance to build back. So you had the hardware design team, then we had the software, like the UX team, focusing really purely on the digital tools, and then I had a team of what we call like strategic designer, where we were more looking at operation and also like more business oriented type of design. And so yeah, that's how we built it. But it was just part of a much larger R&D with heavy like hardware engineering and bio research technology as well.
Fantastic, fantastic. I can imagine the amount of operations it takes for vertical farming startup to create the whole concept all the way to actually execute it on the supermarket or anywhere else, and then scale it. So yeah, I can see how somebody who has the background of design leadership can give a lot of benefits to the startups. I'm gonna use this opportunity and your experience working in vertical farm industry. I just have a couple of questions in this regard. We've seen, as you mentioned that too, we've seen the uprise of the industry and then a big, very painful fall. My question to you would be, from the design leadership perspective, from that experience, what do you think it will take from the vertical farm startup to succeed? What was that one, maybe two, three components that was missing that caused such a big catastrophe, I would say?
Like every good problem, I think the solution is, I mean, it's not the solution, but the reasons are multiple. So in my opinion, yeah, what brought these into an end, and you're right, and I looked at the competitors that we had at the time, and almost none of them are still existing. And I think that the problem, looking at it, is that it was an industry, or it's an industry at the time, which was trying to solve not a actual consumer need problem, but an industry problem. The agricultural industry is a very operational heavy, capex heavy, and opex heavy industry. And the vertical farming, the idea, or one of the idea was that, oh look, okay, yes, we save in terms of footprint, we can bring it closer to the cities, but we can automate it also as much as possible, and basically all the unit economics will be optimized through that. But you're not really solving the problem for someone who wants to buy the products. For them, like, okay, yeah, it may have like a better taste. It will probably, you can also say that, and it's true, that you use less water, you use less electricity, and so on. But for a lot of them, actually, they fail to demonstrate it properly to their consumer. You can tell the whole story. At the end of the day, tomato looks like a tomato, and basil looks like basil. So I think this industry, and I think that Infarm did great at the beginning, I mean, for a large part of it, because we had this approach of, no, we're going to place the farm in the supermarket. And we're going to make it clear as well that this farm is not for decoration. It's not, people will think that, yeah, it was a marketing tool. And so, no, I can tell you that, no, this farm had an actual output which was like supplying clearly the supermarket. And so at that point, you could see the thing. It's a seedling. I come back next week, the same plant actually grew, and now I can buy it. So you can create that. The storytelling was very transparent there. Even though we had like all the difficulties fighting with other, I could tell them like competition, but it was more like how to say. With the traditional agriculture, you can slap a nice picture of a beautiful field and a red farm behind and say, yeah, it's all bio and so on. That's the only view that your consumer will have. To bring like vertical farming was a bit more complicated, and to explain also what it is. But anyway, so our approach was, okay, we want to bring it there for them. But then so it grew. But then, this remained operational heavy to operate. We're still talking about like, herbs, something which before was like the smallest section of your supermarket, and now we're going to expand it and so on. But it worked. And we showed also, with refinements on the operation, that we could show profitability on that aspect of the business. And to have those farms being operated, basically having a profitable business on this. But the challenge was then, okay, now you're growing there, you've raised a lot of VC capitals and so on. We need to produce even more. Then we start to build like larger systems, and we need to build more automation, and etc., etc. And the more you go, then the industry, you're just working for your own scaling, and you're losing sight of what are we doing actually, what problem are we resolving, why, basically, are we bringing a product which is more meaningful for a consumer, that they will buy our product versus another one, and which is like kind of the end idea of it? No. And that's where I think things started to go down, when you realize that most of the growth, most of the project is just about sustaining that growth, but it's not offering, or it's not bringing added value for the end product. I would say that's So when I look today at some vertical farming which are successful in bringing profitability and growth and so on, for me they are doing one thing, which is that they are not trying to overscale their product. They're trying to answer a very specific demand from a very specific type of users, meaning that they're going into specialty product growth. That could be for pharmaceutical, for example. That could be there is a very interesting company which is doing for specialty herbs for Michelin star chefs, where the chefs would like to have that product in a very specific growth state and so on, and with mixing of this taste and this and so on, they can grow that for them. These are succeeding, but their goal is not to overly scale. I remember when I started, I read that article. Someone was giving already their feedback on the vertical farming and mentioning that it's currently there was a big craze thing. People think it's a bit like dollar business. Actually, no, it's a penny business. There needs to be so much optimization on every step of the process that for you to cut on the right, basically to be profitable, it's very deep, step-by-step, small steps engagement on refining the tools, the processes, and so on. I think that if you do that, still you need to keep in mind that you're solving an actual customer demand behind.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I totally love your point, which I think I agree to, that it's mostly solving industry problems rather than consumer problems, because at the end of the day, cucumber or lettuce is the same. And another quote I looked at while talking about vertical farming, it was uh, somebody describing it as Silicon Valley investors investing money in vertical startups and expecting from them like a tech startup ROI while they are growing lettuce. So there was a there was a bubble at some point. Then successful companies lead others to do the same, and we ended up where we ended up now. But I also totally loved your example of somebody who's doing who's growing the specialty greens for Michelin star restaurants, and that can be one of the keys. I mean, finding something that niche, or finding or growing herbs for, as you mentioned, pharmaceuticals. Maybe that's the answer for today. And also the timing is very important, because we never know 10 years from now, maybe 20 years from now, how important it will be to grow. And one side note here, which I just read a week ago, is that people are always talking about 2050, and I always thought, oh, it's far away. But right now, as of June 2025, we are closer to 2050 than we are to 2000. And it's blew my mind, because, okay, it's coming, and it's coming pretty fast. Thanks for sharing that. And now I want to talk about the amazing job and amazing things you do at Dryad. You're solving some huge problems, and I'm a big fan of you guys. But just tell me what exactly that you do. What does Dryad do, and then what's your role in this huge thing?
Okay, yeah. Dryad is a startup in Berlin. We created a sensor system, which detects wildfire ultra early. So that means that we could detect wildfire within minutes, and even sometimes within seconds, but within minutes, before they actually spread. Because that's the key part of wildfire is the sooner you can detect it, the least amount of material and operation and costs you will need to actually to suppress it, and so to reduce the amount of damages that are done with this wildfire. So for this, we created a sensor which is working like an electronic nose, which detects gas variation. So detecting the variation of gas composition. And from this, and with heavy machine learning training, we could detect is that going to be a fire, or is it the start of a fire or not? So unlike, for example, cameras or satellites, which actually detect plumes of smoke, or could detect have a heat signature detection, which requires the fire to be already quite large to be detected. With our system, we can detect actually at the smoldering stage. When the fires start and they start to be a bit of smoke, but it's not an open fire yet. And so we believe that with this system, we could identify those fires way earlier. Operationally, that's literally, so we have hundreds, if not thousands, of those sensors that we could deploy, and we create mesh networks. So it's all operated through LoRaWAN system. We build gateway network, and then which covers with those sensors. And then with this, we can detect fire. The good thing as well is that with those sensors, we can manage the density. What we know is that 80% of wildfire are actually started by accidentally started by human, within human either activities or someone dropping a cigarette butt and so on, but mostly general human activities. And so they will start where what we call the wildland urban interface are. And so this is why that, for example, a camera would or satellite would cover the entire area. With that, latency issues, for us with those sensors, we can actually focus on where are the high risk areas, where are the high risk, high value sections that we need to protect, and we deploy that these sensors. And actually, to go back to one of your questions, which is like what I did first with Infarm, I did exactly the same thing first with Dryad. It was with Infarm, it was actually identifying the overall process with with the farms and how to operate them and how to procure them and how from seeds to packaging that would work and so on. With Dryad, it was the same thing. It was then trying to understand. The first thing for me was to understand, okay, what is the overall deployment process and operational process there, and how can we optimize it? And the goal was, okay, when I arrived, the deployment process was taking, in terms of planning and back and forth and so on, months, and now we can reduce it into like just week. Because we identified all the opportunities in terms of planning, in terms of the product itself and so on, to then compress it as much. So that's my focus there. So with them, I lead the design part of it. So I have a direct impact on so we have a part which is the digital tools. So how do you plan a site? How do you monitor that site? How do you get alerts from that site? And then the hardware itself. And so I can put back my hardware designer hat for that, and then rebuild that. So it's
Nice.
a lot of building.
Once again, you're doing an amazing job, and I really hope that you succeed and will be spread all over the world, because wildfire is something that obviously is causing a lot of damage, but it feels it makes you feel like you can't change anything, because as you've said, once wildfire is already identified, it's so late. There's almost zero chance unless it rains or somehow all of it goes down. So all the best luck to your team. Another hat that you are wearing is, and that's how exactly we met, being a mentor at HEC. And I've experienced it firsthand, on the mentorship of yours. But for our listeners who watch to us today, you mentor startups, right? And the perspective, I would guess, would be the design thinking. What is your main direction of mentorship, and what is that one advice, if you could boil it down to one, that you are giving or would give to all the startups?
It's a very good question, because I actually also think that whenever I have discussions with startup, and I love really doing this, so I do that with HSC, I do that pro bono because I just love the idea that I could be thrown into a new field and to meet founder who wants to develop their own product, and they have like this idea of impact, and then for me trying to help them on that. But I always see consistently the same issue, which is, and it kind of goes back to they don't try to actually understand the actual ecosystem where their product lies in. And this is critical, especially when they will try to find, for example, when they want to try to find actual ways to generate revenue or to push the scaling of their product and so on. For them, trying to understand that for them, their product, the user for who they are designing the product is not obviously that same person who would have an interest for them to actually pay for that product for that end user to use. But a lot of them would be just very, very focused on the end one and lack the kind of the breadth there to identify those other stakeholders on which you can then build a strategy to actually know, okay, how do I architecture my offering, how do I architecture my product, and so on. And then a basic thing, which is talk to your users. Don't wait to have an end product. Don't wait to have like something fully functional. I did product testing with ideas literally, on paper. Like trying to understand, and from discussing with the user, like, okay, well, like from this, how do you feel about that product? What would you do if you were in that case, etc. And you can learn so much, and you can go much faster. And I saw so many startups which are too shy to actually truly go out and test something. And I think that this is very critical. Finally, trying to integrate the sense of scale when you are developing your product. And a lot of startups that I see are thinking, oh yeah, but that's going to be a later problem. Like how to optimize that cost and that cost. That's going to be a later problem. Right now I'm trying to solve that and so on. Okay, great. But I can tell you already that your later problem, you're going to have all the problems at that moment. So you need to start to think of, okay, what the decision that I'm taking now, even though they might change, even though the context might change and so on, but the decision that I'm taking now, are these potentially actually scalable solutions, and what needs to happen to make those decisions, to make this actually scalable. If not, then you end up in, thankfully, in still a scaled. I saw like larger company where they are successful, but they're just like bleeding money on small decisions that they made a while back and did not think that through. So actually in that case I asked them, try to map every systems, users which are interacting with your product now, how you expect it to happen in the future. What needs to happen for this, to work on? What are the KPI you need to set up for this to work on? And then, you build it like this.
Interesting. I could, as a founder, I could relate on so many comments that you mentioned. And as you've said, we as the founders feel like, okay, this can be solved later on. It doesn't seem like an urgent thing. But then time passes and you wish you had things got together earlier. So thanks for sharing that.
And one last thing, and it's a bit like preaching for my own church on that, but for a lot of them, trying to bring them to, okay, identify when do you need actually a designer to support you. Because designers have this thing that we could make, and we can make ideas tangible, and we bring tangibility to an idea to a refinement level that, if you're not trained for that, becomes complicated. Of course, now you got also like a lot of tools with AI and Lovable and all of these like AI aided, like just for the digital side of it, at least, but then for the hardware and the service and so on, having that capability early, so maybe not at the early seed level, but thinking about it, actually pre-Series A and so on is very important, because then you are at the stage of your startup where you are building on the vision still, and you need the people to actually bring that vision together from a service standpoint, from a product standpoint, from all of that. So trying to not to forget and not to think that, and it's a problem a bit of the design side, which is it's been very fragmented. But trying to think of it, and what I mean by fragmented is that now you've got the UI designer, and you've got the UX designer, and you've got the motion designer. That's a very different way of thinking for that, but having a designer who can help you on a holistic approach is extremely valuable to move fast, actually, and to grow into something which is then industrializable and scalable.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Indeed, you mentioned or you touched some of the foundations that is crucial for scaling, because we founders, we are, and to use another reference of fire, we are too busy taking out fires we have today or we're gonna have tomorrow, and you think like, okay, I can postpone that. But then you look back and you said, "Oh, I wish I had done that earlier." So, and I can relate to what you've said. Thanks for that. And basically, our last question. We have a tradition. We end up our conversation with our guests with one particular question. It's the topic of our podcast. It's called Next Agriculture. And as we mentioned, 2050 is now closer than 2000, which means asking a question of how do you envision agriculture 250? You wake up, it's 1st of January, and you read the news about agriculture. What is it in there? Where is your food grown? How is it grown? Who grows it? Anything that you can think of, we would love to hear.
I hope that in 2050 we will be able to have much more empowered farmers, which will be able to distribute like much more locally their products as well. I hope by that 2050, actually, while we see a decrease of farmers, I hope that we will see some level of an increase of farmers, because we can rethink the way food is distributed, is grown. All of that within that much more like sustainable approach. Ways to do that, and that I start to see, is actually the democratization of farming intelligence. I see much work on, you have company like yours, you got Cropix as well, bringing intelligence to farmers. There is this other company that I stumbled upon that I help, called like PS Technology. They do like, it was a while back with HEC. They do automated soil analysis for farmers as well. And I hope that, you have this technology called help on, improving soil and improving growth and improving crop production. But all of this needs to be, I hope that this will be still done in a much more
sustainable.
I hope that by 2050, farmers will be much more empowered. At the same time, from a intelligence standpoint, and I see companies like yours, Cropex, for example, doing that as well, doing like bringing intelligence to the farmers. I see companies like PS Technology doing like soil health automated analysis. That you have at the same time the power of technology to allow farmer to grow more, to keep a large good crop production against like the climate adversity, all while not being a fully technological centric solution. Like, it needs to come also from the way we distribute food, the way it's retributed, the way we consume it, and so on, to push toward a more sustainable industry in general. So my hopes is that we will be able to balance a technology intelligence with as well like more the human intelligence, which will at the same time bring more people to be farmers as well, like being able to focus on more locally grown type of products, to make that area much more attractive as well. That's what I would hope. Will that be the path where that's going? I am not 100% sure, but that's what I would like to see.
Sounds like a great hope, and we hope let's hope that 2050 agriculture, as you've said, is farmers more empowered, more sustainable, more locally distributed, and the great balance of people being in the farm empowered with technology. Benoit, it was a great pleasure to talk to you, to hear about what you have to say, hear about your experience, and stay tuned. We will be having another conversation, I guess, sometime from now, and let's see, are we on the right path you just mentioned of your hopes, or is there still a lot of room for improvement? Thank you very much for being our guest today. Wish you and your team all the best.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.